All right, here we are. We are doing an interview with a very, very special guest. We're doing it live and in person, which I know you haven't normally seen from me. I'm on the island of Puerto Rico, as most of you know by now, and so I'm joined by a very special guest and now a new friend, Yaron Brook. He's head of the, or was with the head of the Ayn Rand Institute. And there's this feeling of being here in Puerto Rico of almost like this Gulch type of a thing where I was just actually at this, it's called Uncommon Entrepreneurs event the other night, and I know you know who those people are. And it was about maybe 50 entrepreneurs and investors that gathered together. And I just had this feeling like everybody has come here, left, these productive members of society, they've left and they've come over here. And so that's super fitting because obviously Ayn Rand and the Gulch kind of came from there. But Yaron, just give us some background on you and kind of what you're working on.
Sure. I mean, I moved to Puerto Rico 4 years ago, and yeah, a little bit about Gulch, but I have a feeling in Gulch things actually worked. And here, you constantly bump up against this. Things don't work here because it's, even though there are a lot of entrepreneurs here, the government of Puerto Rico is particularly ineffective and inefficient, and unfortunately there's a certain culture of statism and socialism here that is pretty destructive. So I moved to Puerto Rico about 4 years ago. I used to be the CEO of the Ayn Rand Institute. I was that for 17 years, from 2000 until 2017. I'm now the chairman of the board. I have my own YouTube channel, podcast. I speak. I love doing public speaking. That's my passion. So I speak all over the world. I do, in a normal year, I do over 100 talks, debates, panels around the world. And I also am a partner in a hedge fund. So I combine all that. That's why I'm in Puerto Rico. The income from YouTube is not high enough to justify moving here, but the hedge fund thankfully is. And then, my background, I had a PhD in finance. I was a finance professor for many years. Before that, I was a civil engineer. In Israel. I grew up grew up in Israel, served in the Israeli military, met my wife in the army. So moved here when I was 26, got an MBA and a PhD, but I've always been kind of committed to, since age 16, to these ideas of Ayn Rand, ideas of freedom, liberty.
Yeah, so that's what I want to talk about today, freedom and liberty. And I want to talk about what we definitely both agree on, which is that real change comes from changing people's thinking. And so anybody that's watching this show knows that I kind of start pretty much every video by saying, I want to change the way you think about money. Almost everything you've learned is wrong. And almost no amount of money, there's pretty much nothing that could create change if you don't have the right thinking for it. And we've seen that obviously with, people winning the lottery. And so everybody thinks, if I could just get lucky and get that next hot crypto tip or whatever it may be, they think could change, but it can't. And so...
that's absolutely true about money. And of course, life is not just about money. Life's life is complicated. It's complex. And you need ideas in order to know how to live a good life. Human beings are a unique animal, right? All other animals out there are born with a genetic code to know exactly what to do. It's all programmed. It's all automatized. They have no real choice, right? And they know exactly how to survive, and they know how to thrive, and they know how to flourish, if you will, to the extent animals can flourish. It's all coded. Evolution did a spin when it came to human beings. It gave us free will. And we have choices. We don't have it coded. We don't know what to do. And how to live a good life, how to live the best life you can, to be happy, to be successful in any realm in life, money being just one dimension, how to be good at relationships, how to be good politically, how to be good in every aspect of our life. That is really hard work. That takes the right set of ideas, it takes the right attitude, it takes the right way of thinking about the world. And at the end of the day, it's philosophy that shapes that. It's philosophical ideas that shape that. And what attracts me to Ayn Rand's ideas is she gives you a toolkit, I think, to live a good life. She gives you the ideas of how to live a good life. Everybody focuses on the politics and what she says about politics, but it's much broader than that. Politics is just one aspect of life. There's, as you said, people win the lottery. They don't know what to do with the money, partially because they didn't earn it, right? Earning money and getting money, not the same thing, and you don't have the same attitude to the money. And partially because they just don't know how to live. They don't have the toolkit to know what are my values, what's important to me, what's not important to me. They haven't really sat down and said, how do I want to live my life? How do I structure my life in a way that promotes my happiness? How do I create values, a hierarchy of values that is going to make me better off every year, every day, every moment? How do I live a flourishing life? That should be the goal of every human being on the planet.
Hey, hold up just for a second. I want to tell you about something. I just got something cool in the mail I want to show you, and it is this new sleek package I just got with a brand new credit card. This isn't just any credit card. This is a BlockFi credit card that's powered by Visa, and it's backed by Bitcoin rewards. So this is a Visa card. I can use it anywhere in the world that Visa is accepted, and the benefit of this BlockFi Visa card is that I get paid back in Bitcoin. Most of my other cards pay me in some sort of reward points. I get airline miles. I'm not very good at using those. They end up accumulating and I don't do anything with them. But getting to earn Bitcoin back with every single purchase is of course something that matters to me. Now, I know for a lot of people they say that the price of Bitcoin is too high. So I say, well, you can always earn Bitcoin. You can get paid in Bitcoin, or you can just get cash back rewards on every purchase paid in Bitcoin with the BlockFi Visa credit card, used everywhere that Visa is accepted. And if you want to sign up for the Visa card that pays back in Bitcoin from BlockFi, there is a link in the description down below. Check it out. So it sounds like you're talking about living like an intentional life. So I sit down, decide the life that I want intentionally, and then I intentionally build that life, as opposed to being a passenger that's just subject to whatever happens to me.
Absolutely. You're not going to be, let's say you want to go to your favorite restaurant tonight. Let's say a new restaurant, because a favorite restaurant, you probably go there automatically, but a new restaurant on the other side of town, and you're just going to get in the car and take left, right, randomly. What's the probability you get to the restaurant? Right. 0, right? Generally, people want to be happy. What's the probability you achieve happiness unless you actually navigate towards it? 0.
Well, and take the time to define.
Well, absolutely. What leads to happiness? What does happiness look like? And look, you have to be careful. This isn't subjective. This isn't whatever you feel like, right? You can define certain goals that are ridiculous and stupid, and even if you achieve them, you won't be happy, right? So even the goals that you attain, even the values that you want to pursue, have to be within a structure of, I think rationality, reason, based on thinking, and they have to be in the context of a human being, a human life. What does a human life look like? And here again, you can get a lot of guidance from philosophy. Aristotle provides a certain guidance on how to live eudaimonia in Greece, which means kind of happiness and flourishing. I think Ayn Rand is the modern equivalent. I think she improves on him. I think she gives you at least a structure of how to think about it. And then you have to sit down and define the values, define how you're going to get there, how you're going to allocate resources, just like you do in a business, resources being time, effort, money, to attaining these values. And then just live it. And you've got to really focus and live your life in a focused way to attain these values. Otherwise, you're going to drift. You're going to go in all kinds of directions, and you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve. And to the extent that you achieve something like winning the lottery, it's going to be meaningless to you because it wasn't really something that you worked towards, and it wasn't in the context of a goal of a hierarchy of values.
Yeah, that's great. I want to get into a little bit of who Ayn Rand was, what these philosophies were, the kind of movement that she started that obviously you and other people are kind of carrying on. And then I want to get into this playbook that you're saying that she left behind. And so maybe there's some practical steps that people can learn that maybe they can get from this interview, that they can kind of have some steps they can get into. Before we do that, though, I think I always think about this quote from Henry Ford. He gave us quite a few good amount of quotes. And he says that thinking is such hard work. That's why so few people do it. And so I think about that. And so I'll give you that quote, but then I want to ask you the question, which is, you're basically making the statement that people don't take the time to think and have this deliberate life. So why? Why don't they?
Well, a lot of reasons. One is it certainly requires effort. I'm going to disagree a little with Henry Ford, only because if it's presented as hard work, people resist hard work, right? It requires effort. It requires engagement. It requires focus. It requires a commitment to doing it, right? And by the way, I think you talk about tools for living a good life. This is the most important commitment you'll make your entire life. Commit to focusing your mind. Commit to thinking. If you commit to thinking, everything else will fall into place, right? You have to learn how to think. You have to learn how to think effectively. You have to introspect and learn what your values are and whether they're appropriate values or not. But the beginning, the starting point for everything is think, right? And why people don't do it? Because it takes effort and because they're not taught to. So if you go into an ethics class at a university, right? Advanced ethics, personal ethics, whatever. What are they teaching? Oh, you should sacrifice to this. You should do this for the community. You should. Nobody ever says to you, okay, let's come up with some principles on how to live a good life and what those principles look like. And by the way, the first principle is think, focus your mind, use your free will that you have. You know, you're never taught any of that. You're not taught to think critically, to think, in a challenging way. You're never taught logic, right? Logic is like arithmetic. You never even taught logic, and we should all know logic because that's how you think. That's what rational thinking means. Right. So you're not taught to take care of yourself. Maybe we're taught to eat good food. Maybe we're even taught how to exercise, but we're never taught proper, mental hygiene, if you will, mental exercise, how to improve that muscle. And that's the most important thing we have is our brain. And yet we're not really taught how to use it and that it applies to everything in our life, not just to business, not just to getting good grades in school, but to every part of our life is going to depend on the quality of the thinking we do.
Yeah. It's easy to think of. I was just thinking like physiology, thinking requires a lot of energy. Yes. And so your body doesn't like to expend energy. Your body's always trying to conserve energy. And so your body wants to have habits. Like it wants to have these like programs that it can run. Yep. Because thinking does burn a lot of calories. It is work, right? And so your body naturally does that. But then I guess a lot of it is just culturally we're not taught to think, which is amazing. And then one thing, because I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and working in this area, is that your brain is almost like a muscle that has to be trained in order to do that. So you can train your brain to think and focus, or you can train it to do the opposite.
And
that's
very
what
easy.
It seems like social media and all those things have done to us today. They've trained us to be distracted.
To some extent, we can blame social media, and I'm fine with that. And social media's got a lot of problems. But look, human beings have been around on the planet, I don't know, a million years, 100,000 in our current form, Homo sapiens. How much of those 100,000 years were cultures that embraced thinking? Maybe a few hundred out of 100,000 years. Yeah. So it's not social media. They didn't have social media in the Stone Age. They didn't have social media in the Dark Ages. There are lots of things that prevent us from thinking. Social media just happens to be the latest fad, but there's always something. Again, it requires work. It requires commitment. It requires some courage. Because you know what will happen if you start thinking? You might discover that you've been thinking some wrong things. Yeah. You might discover that your neighbors are wrong, that your friends are wrong, that your parents are wrong, that maybe your religion is wrong. I don't know. But there's a lot of things that suddenly open up because you're thinking, and you have to be willing to face the idea of things being differently than what you were taught. Suddenly things being differently than maybe the media has told you and maybe the authorities today have told you. So people shun that, and of course the people in power don't want you to think. And this is how it, in a sense, it all started, right? I mean, the tribal leader and the witch doctor don't want you thinking. They want you relying on them to think. That's how they maintain their job. So the witch doctor is going to say, don't bother thinking. I'm in communication with the guy who really matters, with the spirit, the world of spirits. I'll tell you what the truth is. You just do your work. And just in case you deviate, the tribal leader has the weapons to keep you in track. So this alliance between muscle and witch doctory has been throughout history. It might not be religion today. It might be some other forms of witch doctory, but it's the same kind of mysticism. It's the same kind of unrelated to reality and unrelated to reason. But that's how they keep us under control. They don't acknowledge that each one of us, every single one of us, has the capacity to know the world, has the capacity to discover truth. Not equal capacity. Some of us are smarter than others, just a reality. But we all have the basic capacity to know the world. And look, most of human history, people didn't believe that. This was a revelation. One of the reasons America is because America is founded on the principle that every individual has the capacity to reason, has the capacity to think for themselves, therefore has rights, which means freedom of action. If I can think for myself, I can act for myself. If I can discover truth about reality, I should be able to pursue that truth. And you shouldn't have the ability to interfere with me. And government is instituted to make sure you don't. That's America. That's the culmination of the Enlightenment. But those are all ideas that came out of the 1800s. They didn't exist before that. Before that, we were told the priest should tell us how to live and what to do.
Part of that, I think, also is that prior to the 1800s, it was very difficult to live. I mean, you were living off the land. And if you were living off the land, you spent all your time trying to...
But that's a reversing cause and effect.
Is that reverse cause?
So, yeah, because the reason we had no advance is because we weren't free to think. So if you think about it, what the 18th century did is at first it liberated the mind.
Because of the printing press and then the
starting with the printing press, and then they earlier than the printing press even, they started discovering the works of Aristotle. Aristotle is a big hero in history in my book, in Ayn Rand's book. Because he's kind of the discoverer of logic, he's the advocate for reason, he's an advocate for ethical egoism. He is the real shining light. Plato is the villain, Aristotle is the hero. And what happens in the 13th century on is they start discovering Aristotle's writing. They start integrating into Western civilization. Suddenly you get the Renaissance, an artistic flourishing where people recognize man as a hero, is capable of choices, is capable of doing these magnificent things. And then slowly you get people suddenly realize, wait a minute, we can discover the truth for ourselves.
You get the
we don't need
Reformation,
authorities. You get the Reformation, and then you get the Enlightenment. And you know the other name for the Enlightenment is the Age of Reason. You get the Scientific Revolution. Suddenly Newton comes around and says, you know what? Every one of you can understand the laws of motion. Whoa, you mean I don't have to read it in an ancient book? I don't have to accept it on faith? You mean I can actually know these things based on observation and based on math?
Yeah.
And Newton's saying, yes. So then they go, okay, so if that's the case, why can't I choose my own profession? Because they couldn't, right? You had to go into the guild your father did, or you were a farmer. Why can't I go to my own profession? Why can't I choose my own wife? Why can't I choose my own political leaders? Why can't I live my life based on my mind, based on my reason? And that leads to more freedom. Freedom leads to more prosperity. Freedom leads to the Industrial Revolution. That change in ideas is what leads to the Industrial Revolution, to us becoming much, much richer and having time and light and all these things. But it's always ideas drive history. So it's throughout history, the battle is always between different sets of ideas, and depending on who wins, that will determine what happens in history.
So I want to get to the step-by-step process of Ayn Rand leftists for building a better life, but there's some pieces here I want to dig into. The first thing I was thinking is you were talking about how the more we think, the more we start to maybe see areas of our life that are good or areas of life that are bad. That can happen. Something that's really been taking off lately, and as a hedge fund guy, you may be paying attention to, it's growing in the financial markets as well, but there's a lot of, we'll call it psychoactive enhanced thinking, whether that be cannabis or psilocybin or, ayahuasca, whatever that is. And that seems to really be kind of having like another renaissance. Do you think that, what do you think about that, I guess?
I'm skeptical. I'm all for enhancing ability to think, and if something can be proved I think, unfortunately, because we made drugs illegal, which I think was a massive mistake, and we should have never done that. I think all drugs should be legal. Research wasn't done to see which one of these have good psychiatric purposes, which one can actually enhance your ability to think, or whatever it is. So we don't have a body of research that actually justifies this. So people are experimenting on themselves, and be careful. And I'd say be careful because you're experimenting on the most important tool you have. It's one thing to change exercise regimes, and if you tear a muscle, it's bad, and you have to recover, and it's not. But you don't want to screw up with your brain, right? So my view is, before you take any of those substances, before you do anything like that, two things. One, test the science, check it out, make sure it's safe. Second, try using your brain without it. Maximize that. Yeah. And then if you still need some more adrenaline, okay, so maybe, right? But 99% of the humanity today is not utilizing what they have without any enhancements. How about do that? And if you have bad thinking habits, if you don't know how to use your brain without any enhancement, enhancing a crummy product is not going to make it better.
Yeah.
It's just going to make the same crummy thinking more elevated. And look, I don't believe you discover truth under the influence of LSD. I think you discover truth when you're completely sober, wide-eyed, no alcohol, no drugs, look out into the world and be aware of what's around you and integrate it and think about it. That's how you discover truth.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of very good truth that you said there. Remove the log out of your own eye before you try to get the speck out of your neighbor's, almost in a sense. Where I was listening to Dave Asprey. He runs a Bulletproof. He's like a body hacker, biohacker, and he talks a lot about improving your sleep. Yep. And he gets into the nth detail on sleep and improvement, cognitive improvement. And he said, people ask me all the time, like, what about this supplement or this supplement? And he says, the first question I ask him is, well, how many hours of sleep are you getting? Don't even bother with any supplement until you're getting the right sleep. Yep. Start with the big stuff. So I think that's good what you said there. Makes sense. Okay, so yeah, just putting that away. Now I want to dig into, so Ayn Rand, she has the Institute, and what were the cornerstones of her teaching that she got from Aristotle? Individualism, freedom of individualism, the importance of that.
So certainly an aspect of individualism. Aristotle, remember, 2,500 years ago, so not everything he said was true, not everything he said was right, but he got the big picture. He got right. Reality is what it is. You don't create it, you don't make it up. Maybe it was in his world there was a prime mover that set it in motion, but is not involved in no miracles. It is what it is. Just accept that. That's a big part of thinking. Accept reality for what it is. And you have a tool to know reality. Reason is Aristotle's great achievement. The emphasis on reason, the importance of reason. Reason only individuals have. We don't have a collective consciousness. You can't eat for me. You can't think for me either. Only I can do my own thinking. So many people rely on other people to do their thinking for them, right?
Even today we're seeing media headlines saying, don't do your own research. Yes. It's dangerous. Yes. Don't think for yourself. Trust the experts.
Always do your own research. Now, in some areas, you need experts, right? I don't know medicine to all its details, but do enough research to know which experts to rely on. Not all the experts agree. Do enough research so if the expert says something wacky, wait a minute, let me look at this more carefully. I don't pretend to know quantum physics. I'm going to rely on experts, but I'm going to do research about which experts I rely on. So there's a level at which I don't want to condemn experts. I love experts. I love that I don't know how to build one of these computers. Right. I know how to do this setup, right? I know how it works, the internet or whatever. I rely on experts to make it work. But if I had to know how it worked, I could at least know enough. I could research enough. So, think for yourself. Thinking is an attribute of the individual. And then, of course, the purpose of thinking, the purpose of you, the purpose of life, of living, is to be successful at it. It's to be happy. You don't live out of a sense of duty. You don't have to. It shouldn't be something that's a burden. It should be something that's fun. And you should structure your life in a way. You should get to the point in life where, of course, not every moment, is an orgasm, right? But you want it all to be building up to a good life, to a feeling that, this is I'm enjoying life. Life is meaningful. Life is good for me, and I'm happy. And so that's part of it. And then, of course, the only political system, just to finish up kind of the key points in Ayn Rand's philosophy, the only political system that leaves you free to live your life based on your values, in pursuit of your happiness, based on your reasoning, is capitalism. It's a system that leaves you free, leaves you alone. The government is there only to protect you from somebody who might do you harm, to protect you from fraudsters, to protect you from muggers, but otherwise you're free to live your life as you see fit. So, she has a position throughout, including in aesthetics and what kind of art one should pursue and why art is important for your life. Most people are not that interested in that, although they should be. But she has this comprehensive philosophy that the bottom line of the entire philosophy is how to live a good life, how to flourish. So
I guess the question is, in today's day and age, I guess we're taught to, well, first I want to jump back. You mentioned that's the definition of capitalism. Let's talk about the definition of capitalism, because today that's a dirty word. I hear people say capitalism, and I've had people challenge me on this, that we know that socialism has killed hundreds of millions of people in the last 100 years. And they say capitalism has killed even more. Capitalism has killed even more. Capitalism was slavery. America was founded on capitalism. That's slavery, and so the definition has definitely been misused and maybe completely perverted or lost. What would you say the definition of capitalism is?
Well, definitions mean perverted and lost, and people have no clue what they're talking about. That is, they don't know history, they don't know cause and effect, they don't understand any of this as part of our educational system, and they're not thinking. They're mouthing something they heard on YouTube. They have no way to defend their position, right? Capitalism is the only system in human history to do away with slavery, right? It's not an accident. The slavery was done away during the height of capitalism, the 19th century. First in England, then slowly through Europe, and then ultimately in a civil war in the United States. A civil war between a capitalist North and a feudal South, a slave-owning South. The South wasn't capitalist. The South was statist. That's why they were pro-slavery. So, no, capitalism, again, only system in human history to do away with slavery. Slavery has been a feature of human existence from the beginning of time. You read about in the Bible, God tells the Jews how to treat their slaves. He doesn't ban slavery. He tells them how to treat the slaves. So they've got everything upside down. Look, capitalism is a system in which the sole role of government is the protection of individual rights, primarily in the context of economics, primarily property rights. It's a system in which everything is privately owned. The government owns nothing, or almost nothing. It's a system in which there's a complete separation between the state, government, and economics, right? So government doesn't regulate, it doesn't manipulate taxes, it doesn't control, it doesn't tell you how much to pay your employees, it doesn't tell you how many benefits to give them, it doesn't tell you what products. You don't have to register your business. What's this about registering your business? Why can't you go out and just start a business? Why does the government even have need for you to register it? So all of that is anti-capitalism. Capitalism is complete freedom. The government is there to protect you. Certain laws have to be passed to make sure that we have clear definitions of property rights, so we know when we're infringing on one another's or when there's ambiguity. If there's a dispute between us, we want somebody to arbitrate that dispute. We want to make sure that people don't invade us, that we have a military to protect us. So a military, a police force, a judiciary, and that's it. You don't need anything more for government in capitalism. So in that sense, capitalism, Ayn Rand called it capitalism the unknown ideal. She has this book called Capitalism the Unknown Ideal. It's an ideal that we've never really had. The world has never been capitalist. In the 19th century, we got the closest after the Civil War. Hong Kong, maybe in the 20th century, got close.
Singapore, kind of, when it started?
Singapore, somewhat, but Singapore is very authoritarian in other respects. Capitalism is broadly freedom. And it includes chewing gum, by the way, not just economic freedom, but also what you do socially. So Singapore is this mixture of economic, as free as it gets in the world today. But even then, Singapore, nobody owns their own house in Singapore. The government, almost all, 90% of all housing is government housing in Singapore. So there are all these quirks about Singapore that make it also not real. So there's never been a capitalist state. What we live today is in a mixture of some capitalism, that is some freedom, and a lot of controls, a lot of regulations, a lot of taxation. And sometimes we get more statism, and sometimes we get less statism. But the proportions of these two change, but we've never had a pure form of capitalism. And all the things that they blame on that people have died of, again, slavery, capitalism got rid of it, didn't institute it, it's always been there. I don't know, I had somebody tell me World War II was caused by capitalism. And I was like, really? Wait a minute, Hitler, National Socialist, fascist, obviously not a capitalist, and Stalin, communist, they started the war, right? They had a deal between the two. They split Poland into two. Stalin took the East, Hitler took the West. Nobody knows this history. Everybody only thinks Hitler's the bad guy. Nobody remembers Stalin is just as evil.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it killed more people, worse, actually. Yeah, it was worse. More people. So here you've got hundreds of millions of people killed by socialism, and capitalism somehow blamed for all this. But this is the resentment they have towards capitalism. They can't define it. They can't think about it. They can't conceptualize it. And they think we have capitalism. What we have today, what we have is capitalism. We do not. I wish we did.
So probably the biggest critique then I would hear about capitalism after that is then I want to dig into the Civil War for a minute with you, but before that, I would say probably the biggest critique of capitalism then I would hear, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, obviously I'm for free markets and capitalism as well, but they would say, well then, without the government, what about the monopolies? And the corporations would take over the world and we'd be all enslaved by the corporations.
Yep. Again, people have no clue, right? They don't understand economics, and this is the economist's fault, because you go into Economics 101 and they have a whole section on perfect competition and monopolies. They do those charts with marginal profit, marginal price, the whole thing. I always say to people, take that section in the econ book that talks about perfect competition and monopoly, rip it out and shred it. It's worthless. It doesn't relate to anything in real life. It has no relationship to anything in the world as we know it. Monopolies don't exist in a free market. There are no such things. Every time we approach free markets, they are big companies. But what are we taught in economics class? We're taught that when you have a monopoly, prices go up, quality goes down. Mm-hmm. And in the real world, the exact opposite happens. Prices go down, quality goes up. You can go back to look at Standard Oil. When they had 93% of all the refining capacity in the United States in the 1870s, prices went down every single year, quality went up every single year. And
because if it didn't, somebody else would come in and outcompete.
Exactly, there's always competition unless the government sets up barriers to prevent them. So the only monopolies that exist are the post office. And anything the government creates a barrier for. Right. And a lot of regulations on the books today are barriers to entry, are ways in which the government has chosen the winners, created barriers around them to protect them, and disincentivized startups for competing with them. So in a free market, there's no such thing as no such thing as monopoly. There's always competition. It's not perfect competition, because perfect competition is not perfect. Perfect competition is stupid. There is no such thing as perfect competition. Competition always arises. For example, who competed Rockefeller out of his business that he was in the 1870s? Because he was selling oil for what in the 1870s? He was selling it as kerosene for lighting. And within a few decades, his market share in lighting would be zero. Because of whom? Thomas Jefferson. So competition isn't always in your, quote, industry.
Well, and you can see Kodak, right? Kodak owned the film industry for 100 years.
And then you get digital, and it's gone. Yeah. But the thing is, with the oil, you wouldn't have identified Thomas Edison as a competitor of Rockefeller's. Rockefeller, they do oil. This guy does electricity. But if you define the market as lighting, then they are competitors. So, and how often does the Justice Department, or whoever does these antitrust lawsuits, know how to define the market properly? They have no clue. So no, there are no monopolies. They don't exist. IBM, you remember IBM? Well, you wouldn't remember, you're too young. But the government went after IBM for decades. It was a monopoly. Why? Because it had mainframes, right? But even when it had mainframes, digital had these smaller computers. And then by the time it went to court in the early 1980s, you had personal computers and mainframes were irrelevant, right? So, every single time they go after these, what was Microsoft's sin? How did consumers suffer for Microsoft? They gave out a product for free, yeah. Right? That's how absurd it is to go after companies for antitrust. So I would say the most evil law on the books in terms of economics is the antitrust laws. They should be scrapped, they should be eliminated, passed by Republicans, by the way, in 1890, and since then it's been downhill from the perspective of economic freedom.
Now, jumping back into a side note, just because I'm curious on the Civil War, obviously the narrative that we're told is it was a fight for freedom, freedom of the slaves. Yep. In my research, it seems that slavery was pretty much on the way out. As a matter of fact, the farms in the South were failing under their own weight because of capitalism, and it was not cost effective or competitive for them to maintain the slaves. And I believe that almost all the slavery was gone going into World War II. There was a couple states that were just kind of... Civil War. And there was a couple states that were holding on, and what really caused it was a couple of the states, it was secession. It was threat.
It was South Carolina seceded. But no, I mean, slavery was widespread in the South, and many states had slavery. Part of the conflict arose because new states were being created in the West, and there was the question of whether those new states would be allowed to have slaves or not allowed to have slaves. That was still a debate. And there was still, I don't know if it was hundreds of thousands or millions, but there were hundreds of thousands of people who were slaves. who were being treated as slaves, beaten as slaves, lynched as slaves, killed as slaves. It was a, yes, I agree completely. Ultimately, slavery would have been eliminated from an economics perspective. But every year where you have a slave is a year in which your government has no legitimacy. Yeah. A government that allows for slavery is a government that is illegitimate government. And the Civil War should have happened right after the Constitution was signed. The fact that it took until 1860s to have it is a great tragedy of history. But the fact is, no matter how many slaves, they need to be eliminated. And if so many states were against slavery, all they had to do was not fight. The fact is that all the South fought. Every one of those states fought. The war lasted a long time. It didn't have to. General Lee, who didn't own slaves, didn't have to lead a Southern army.
But they rallied because of the secession thing. They believed states' rights were more important than federal rights.
Yeah, but I think that's all. I think that's nonsense. I mean, I think secession is nonsense. But
do you think secession is nonsense?
Yeah,
even in talks of today.
Today, certainly it's nonsense, because I think the people who would secede would create countries worse than the place they were seceding from. So
Texas being out from under federal regulation?
I think it would be horrible.
It'd be horrible?
It would be horrible. Texas run by religious conservatives as a super majority with no controls would be a horrible place to live.
I want to get into that conversation.
We can talk about that, but let me just say, the Civil War, in my view, is a completely just war, and it's good that it happened. Too bad it didn't happen earlier. It's tragic that 600,000 kids had to die for that, but I blame the South for that. And South Carolina did not want to secede because it wanted to be free. It wanted to secede because it wanted to maintain a barbaric institution called slavery, which federal law should have banned. And under the Constitution, under the concept of individual rights, the federal government had an obligation to go in and eradicate slavery.
From what I've seen too, a lot of people blame the founding fathers for allowing slavery to be in the Constitution. But in the early version that Thomas Jefferson penned, that isn't really well known, he had actually written in there to remove slavery, but they knew they couldn't get all the states involved.
They needed a compromise.
And so they had to compromise a little bit. So the founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson, were for ending slavery, but it still got to.
Yes, a few of them.
I want to have a question, though, because everything's a spectrum. Right, we're living in this world where there's a spectrum. You said we've never had pure capitalism. We have a spectrum of that. If on a spectrum we had on one side 0% of your wages were taken by the government or whoever, that's 0%. So you're 100% free.
Well, that's not the only parameter of freedom. That's only one dimension of freedom. There are many others.
Okay, so on one side you're free to do what you want and keep the fruits of your labor. On the other side of the spectrum, 100% of your pay is taken by your master, the government or whoever. Yeah. So that's the spectrum. Sure. So we're at 50%. Yeah. So are we free or are we slaves?
It's a good question. I think we're partially free in some areas of our lives, and we are not free in other parts of our lives. I don't want to call us slaves, because that, I think, is because slavery is such an evil institution, so horrible, that we live pretty good lives in spite of the fact that they take 50% of our income. I don't want to compare us to slaves, but it's pretty bad. And it's pretty disgusting, and it's pretty obnoxious that they take so much. And you're underplaying it, because they take a lot more than 50%, because you're not considering property taxes and Social Security taxes and sales taxes and all of that. And they're taking a lot more than 50%. Now, I live in Puerto Rico, so they don't anymore. They take very little of my income, although sales taxes are high here. Yeah. But yes, we are today living in a mixed economy tilted towards unfree, not towards free.
I just wanted to take a second to explain to you one more time just how cool having this new BlockFi Visa credit card is. I've started to move a lot of my bills over to get paid from this. Of course, all my business supplies, I'm starting to pay for this, my advertising budgets, and I'm starting to run as much as I can through it, because I'm getting paid a percentage back of every single transaction in Bitcoin. We want to save in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is an asset that goes up in value because of the deflationary nature of it. And we want to spend our fiat. So I'm spending my fiat through my BlockFi Visa card, and I'm getting back Bitcoin that I can save and I can hold. I expect it to go up in value a lot. I expect to hold my Bitcoin. I'm gonna pass it to my kids and my grandkids, and hopefully my great grandkids will have my Bitcoin one day. So I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna spend my fiat through this card, and I'm gonna earn back Bitcoin that I'm going to save. If you want to get one, there's a link down below.
So it wasn't a direction I had planned to take the conversation, but let's talk about civil war. We talked. I know. We talked a lot about our succession or whatever we're going to talk about. But I think maybe secession would lead to civil war. That's what led to it before. So I think we have talked a lot about the left versus the right, Republicans, Democrats, whatever. I think in regards to individualism and collectivism, they're both similar, but they're on opposite ends of that spectrum, but they're on opposite ends of the left-right spectrum. So it seems that the left, cancel culture, whatever, that's kind of what I would clarify that. It's rules for thee, not for me. It's you do what I say. You don't get to eat meat. You don't get to travel. You put this medicine in your body. You can't go here, right? Kind of a thing. This is, you don't say what we like. We cancel you. Like Dave Chappelle, you're kicked off network news. Versus the other side, maybe it's framed up where like, maybe the right, if I framed it up broadly, I would say the right says, let me keep my guns, let me keep my income, let me eat my meat, let me choose what schools my kids go to, let me do me. And the left says, no, you don't get school choice, no, you don't get guns, no, you don't get to eat meat, and no, you don't get to fly. And it seems like the two sides are so far apart, partly because, in my opinion, I believe, I'll do me, you do you. I'm cool. You make your choice, I do mine, and whatever. But the other side says, no, you don't get to make your choice. You do what I say. And so because of that, there's no compromise. And it seems like we've become so divided, there's no way that we have to separate.
Yeah, and it could be that we do. I think if we do, it's going to be bloody. I don't think it'll be peaceful. We'll see. And if it's bloody, it could be very bloody because you got nukes involved and you got a lot of it's not going to be pleasant.
Why couldn't we just peacefully split?
Because I don't think there's the will. Look, take Texas, right? Let's say Texas wants to secede. Well, what's Austin going to do? Right? I mean,
they have a choice to move.
Well, sure, but so do you have a choice to move today. I mean, a lot of Americans could move elsewhere. They could move to another country. Is that really what you want to do? Is that really what you want to say? We're going to secede. If you don't like it, move out of here. And it's a significant portion of the population. And I will say, and I know people on the right, and I don't know that you're on the right, but people on the right don't like to hear it.
I'm on the side of individualism.
Yeah. A lot of the people on the left are the productive people in society, right? I mean, look at Silicon Valley. Look at the wealth created there. Look at Austin, Texas. The reason everybody's moving to Austin, Texas is because it's not Texas. They're not moving to Midland, Texas. They're not even moving to Dallas, Texas. They're not moving to Houston, Texas. So some people are. They're moving to Austin, Texas. Why? Because Austin has culture, because Austin has high tech, and Austin has a great university. And it has all those great universities partially because the left brings those things. Now, I'm not a left. I'm not pro-left in any way, right? But my point is that the right as identified, you presented a right that, cool, I'm all for those people. Leave me alone, let me do my thing, cool. But the right's not that. I mean, think about, and we probably disagree about abortion, but think about the law in Texas about abortion. This is the most irrational law I've ever heard, right? An Uber driver who drives a woman to a clinic where she gets an abortion can be sued by anybody for having facilitated an abortion, even somebody who has no, quote, stake in it, right? No standing legally. I mean, that's nuts. Imagine that applies to anything, any behavior we didn't like.
It does. People can bring lawsuits. I mean, you have ambulance chases. You have people going into businesses and filing lawsuits against them because they violated.
Only because that person believes they were damaged by it. That's the law, right? People abuse the law, but this is stated in law that you can, without standing, sue anybody who you think facilitated this. That's
broke the law.
That's it. No, not broke the law. Who had an abortion, right?
But because there was a law against it.
You took an Uber, right? If an Uber driver drives somebody and they get out of the car and then they break into a store, you don't sue the Uber driver. And suddenly you can't sue the Uber driver.
Uber driver drove somebody to do a murder and then drove them back, would they be considered?
If the Uber driver knew that they committed a murder, but if you just drive somebody to a place and then leave, and by the way, even then, I can't sue them. The state sues them because they committed murder, but I can't sue. So my point is this, that Texas has some great people. I love Texas. I lived in Austin for 6 years. But Texas has massive irrationalities. Texas is heavily regulated. Texas has horrible licensing laws, lots of regulations and all kinds of. It doesn't have an income tax because it taxes the oil and gas industry through the roof, so it doesn't need an income tax. If you look at Economic Freedom Index, Texas is not number 1, it's not number 2 or number 3 or number 4. It's somewhere there. And in terms of culture and in terms of spirit and in terms of places to live, yes, Austin is wonderful, but I don't know that you want to live in Midland, Texas. I don't know if that's the kind of country I would want. Yeah. I don't know that those people have the kind of values, and I don't think that those people, if I had a different color skin, I'm not sure if those people, if I had a different type of sexual orientation, would have this attitude of, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, everybody's free. Maybe everybody's free as long as they look like me and as long as they behave like me. So I don't trust the right today, just as much as I don't trust the left today, and I think the right today has a lot of authoritarian tendencies. Donald Trump's new social media company that's coming out has a little clause in it where one of the things you're not going to be allowed to do on the social media company is do anything that might be viewed as insulting to Donald Trump. So, it's not quite the state censoring, but that's the inclination of many people on the right, is to censor, it's to manipulate. A lot of people on the right today admire Orban in Hungary, the prime minister of the prime minister in Hungary. That's a state that does not have intellectual freedom. It does not have real freedom of speech. It certainly doesn't have freedom of journalism. The right today in America, and maybe historically the right was better, but the right today in America is anti-capitalist. It's anti-individual freedom. It is statist. It just has a different approach to statism than the left, and maybe less visible, and I think much more compatible with Americans. So we talked about this over lunch. I think Americans will never accept woke culture. I think it's going to be rejected. I think in 2 years, maybe 5 years, we'll be laughing at that we ever had it, because Americans think it's the stupidest thing ever, and it is, right? What scares me is that I think they're much more inclined with the right kind of leader to embrace a type of statism and a type of authoritarianism that wraps itself up in a flag, maybe wraps itself up in religion, it wraps itself up in pseudo-capitalism, what's presented as capitalism but is really fascism. That scares me a lot more, because I think that's more palatable for Americans. I don't see individualism in America anymore. It used to be. I've even seen a difference between 1987 and today in terms of individualism.
Yeah,
declining.
I would agree with that. I think maybe we drew the battle lines too hard on Texas, because and what the right is, because I think we probably have different definitions, because it's not easily definable.
That's why it's not a useful term anymore. That's why I like individualism as a collectivism.
As do I.
And I think there are a lot of collectivists in Texas, and that's why I'm worried about Texas.
Yeah, so I also draw my lines the same as that. I guess I'm just thinking. Like I said, lots and lots of talk about Civil War. It's all over the news. It seems like there are two sides that are that are opposed, and where exactly you draw that line, it's a little bit difficult to assume.
So I don't think they're that different. So this is my fear, right? I've been talking about this for over a decade. Is that a leader arises, somebody with real charisma, somebody smart, real charisma, good looking. And says, you know what?
Ron DeSantis.
Well, maybe, or maybe Tucker Carlson, who knows? But somebody rises up and says, you know what? You're all right. You people on the left, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. And you people on the right, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. Let's find a way to bring it all together, right? We all agree that individualism is dead. What we need is to rally around an America that respects the environment, that really cares about climate change, that really cares about ancient forests, and really cares about the little furry animals. So give something to the environmentalists, throw them a bone. And the issue of race is very important, and we have to address it. But you know what? This whole woke stuff has gone too far, and we need to bring back religion, we need to bring back the family, and we need to bring back family values, and we need somebody who can wrap it all up into with a nice bow. And suddenly, just like in Weimar Germany, the leftists will suddenly discover that this guy actually talks their language of authoritarianism, actually is a little appealing. Maybe nationalism isn't that bad, and maybe that's what we should, and that's what scares the bejesus out of me. And I don't know where that guy comes from. Maybe he comes from the left. I don't know. But somebody who can unite the country, because I think the country's ready for uniting. I don't think the split is deep. I think the split is superficial, because you've got collectivists of the right and collectivists of the left fighting. And the solution is unite them all around a collectivist agenda. Maybe it's another war, maybe it's a terrorist attack.
I think the hottest issue right now, and let's be careful because this is on YouTube, but the hottest issue right now is that half the people think that you should be locked in your house if you don't take this experimental medicine. And the other half says, what do you mean? I've had it. It wasn't any big deal. I don't believe in that. The science doesn't back it up. And so there's a big divide there. One says, you should be forced to do what I say. You should be locked in your house. And the other half says, no, I don't. And so that's a pretty big divide.
Yeah, but it's even there. Both sides are wrong. So a lot of people on the good side don't lock up and we should be free and so on. They believe that, and that's good. But they also believe that the vaccines, there are plenty of people there who believe that they're implanting some chip in us, that there are all kinds of weird theories about the vaccines.
But regardless of what reason they don't want it, doesn't matter. Right?
No, well, it does. It does absolutely matter because the question is...
They believe they have the choice.
They should have that choice. I'm not arguing that point. I'm arguing that it's not that they believe it for the right reasons. They don't, many of them don't believe it for the right reasons. So to me, both sides scare me because if either side wins, the mentality that has driven them is what's going to dictate the future. Yes, I'm always going to be on the side of freedom, even your freedom to do stupid things, right? I'm for drug legalizations and legalizing prostitution and legalize it all, right? And let people do. And if somebody wants to inject themselves with heroin and screw up their lives, let them screw up their lives. Don't ask me to bail them out. Don't take my money to bail them out. But give them the freedom to screw it up. But I'm not for drug addicts. I don't want drug addicts running the world. So I believe that both sides of this COVID, I know a lot of people who believe it's a conspiracy, that COVID was made up. Why, if that's the case, is it in Hungary, which is Tucker Carlson's our favorite country, why are they doing vaccine mandates, right? These are on the right. So, the idea here is that vaccine mandates and all of this stuff is statism par excellence. The people who are advocating for freedom are not really advocating for freedom. They just don't like these mandates. They like different mandates. And if they got power, they would lock me up for something else that I did. Maybe I engaged in the wrong sexual practices. I don't know. Yeah. So I'm scared in the world in which we live because I see collectivists and statists and people who want to lock me up on everywhere, not just on this one issue, but across the entire board. And I don't completely trust the people who happen to be my allies on COVID on any particular issue. Plus, again, I think both sides lack nuance. I mean, COVID is a complicated question. It depends on you. This is individualism, right? The problem with COVID is we treat everybody the same. Instead of, okay, how old are you? What's your health situation? If you're over 80, then what you do with COVID is different. Maybe you should stay home, right? If you're under 20, COVID is a non-issue for you.
And maybe if you're risky and you feel like risking your life, you should be able to go out. I ride dirt bikes. Yeah. I have friends that have died. I've had metal put in every one of my limbs. And I still ride dirt bikes. I'm willing to take that risk. It's part of my life. And
if people want to take risks, they can take risk. But if somebody tests positive, should they be allowed to just walk around no matter what? Well, if they test positive.
So I think the answer is obviously no. But I think the answer, though, comes back down to individualism, where, for example, if I get a cold, just a cold, I wouldn't go hang out with my friends because I don't want my friends to get the cold, right? And I would keep myself from my friends because I don't want them to have a cold, even though I know it's no big deal.
Let's say
but I think it goes back to that education. It goes back to
personal responsibility.
Well, individuals and personal responsibility, but also respect for others.
Of course, but think about if you're running a facility that houses people who are over the age 65, are you going to test people before they enter in the midst of a COVID? Yes, of course you are, right? Because you don't want, because these people, if they get COVID, are likely to die. The probability of dying under COVID if you're over 80 is very high. It's not just a common cold. It really is bad. For kids, it's meaningless. And instead of thinking about how does it affect you? How does it affect me? What is the government's role here? Which is very minimal. It's basically to make sure that if you're infected, you don't go infect everybody else, right? That's what a government does in infectious diseases. It's responsible for not allowing the infection to spread, but only if you're positive. If you're negative, you're innocent. The government has no business in your life. Not with vaccines, not with anything else. On the other hand, vaccines are not voodoo Vaccines are not dangerous. They're not some scary thing that people have instituted to take away your freedom. So again, you got to think of it individualistically about the effect it has on each individual. Who should get a vaccine? Who shouldn't get a vaccine is an individual choice. But also, you need to think. What's the real risks involved? And people don't.
I'd love to dig in deeper on that conversation, but seeing as it's going on YouTube, I might already have to cut some of it out. We'll see how that works.
Oh, I say this stuff on YouTube all the time. I've never been limited on YouTube for this.
Censorship is real. It's crazy. When I was in high school, the USSR fell and the Berlin Wall fell when I was in high school. So I grew up under that Cold War, and man, I grew up afraid of that. And I grew up thinking man, they tell you what you can do and what you can say. And man, a couple years ago, and it dawned on me, I can't say whatever I want on YouTube or whatever. Boy, that was heavy.
I say everything on YouTube. I don't limit myself at all. Once in a while, they won't monetize a video of mine. Fine.
Lately, they've been taking a bunch of channels down. Two of my friends.
Let them take it down. It'd be great publicity. But they won't. I doubt that they will, partially maybe because I'm too small. But so far, the only thing they don't monetize of mine, I can say anything about COVID. So far, the things they won't monetize about mine is if I talk about sex, abortion, even though I'm on their side on abortion, I'm pro-choice, they take it down. And foreign policy, because I'm pretty radical when it comes to foreign policy. But those are the things they take down. Almost nothing else has been taken down or demonetized. Nothing's been taken down. But we'll see. If they kick me off of YouTube, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, my plan, my goal is I'm moving my audiences onto censorship-resistant platforms. Okay, good. Not like a new Trump network where they could now censor me, or Rumble, or any of those platforms that could eventually decide to censor me. There's two new platforms that are being built on the Bitcoin network where I can literally host my videos, my podcast, and my members can chat. But when they're chatting back and forth, instead of going through WhatsApp or Signal servers, it's peer-to-peer over the Bitcoin network, censorship-resistant.
But can everybody see it?
In a community chat, they can all see it. Yeah, just like a Telegram, kind of. Yeah, but right now it goes to Telegram. So
that's the future.
So I'm using. I want to use YouTube and Twitter to pull people into that, and then we can.
No, that's fantastic, and
so I don't want to just be like, if I get taken down, big deal. Switching gears.
I'm not going to change what I say on any platform to satisfy anybody, and if they decide to take me down, they do. Luckily, my income somewhat depends on this, but not enough to make me worry about it too.
The thing for me is it's a bigger mission, and I know we're on the same mission. So let's just jump back into that, which is changing the way people think. At the end of the day, there's a million ideas, but what underpins all those is how people think, which is how we start.
Well, they got to start thinking. Too many people are not thinking.
They got to start thinking. And so I want to help people change the way they think. And so in order to do that, I need to reach as many people as I can. And so let me, if I have to dance around a couple words to reach as many people as I can, great. And then I'll bring them to my other communities, and then I can say what I want, kind of a thing. Sure. It's just part of my mission. But so if we jump back into that, going back to Ayn Rand, and she's given us this blueprint to living a great life. I think you define that as a life that brings us happiness. I don't know if I necessarily agree. Well, I guess I would agree that happiness is the pursuit, but I guess the question is what brings us happiness. And I think that comes through fulfillment and meaning. And typically, I believe after having kids that I say happy people serve others. And so when I help someone else and I see their life better, the greatest joy I've ever had is helping my kids and seeing them have joy. When I've gone down and done trips in foreign countries and helped people and seen the joy that it's brought to them, it's the greatest joy I've ever known. So but whatever. Yeah. So I guess I'm still chasing my own joy, right? But how we achieve that is different. But anyway, so you say that's the greatest joy, or the greatest pleasure, pursuit is our own happiness, and she's laid out this blueprint. So fill us in on what that blueprint is and maybe how we can kind of achieve that.
Well, it goes back to what we talked about before. If you think about the first thing you have to do when you think about this blueprint, and you can call the blueprint morality. What is morality? Morality is a blueprint to living. Morality is the blueprint by which you should live. And Ayn Rand has a new moral code. That's the blueprint that she presents, is a new moral code. And what's at the heart of it? At the heart of it is the thing that allows us to survive, allows us to thrive. I think happiness comes from achieving one's values. I'm not talking about momentary joy. I'm talking about happiness. I'm talking about when you're older and looking back and say, yes, I lived a full, complete life. That comes from achieving one's values. It comes from setting ambitious goals and getting there. It comes from, being productive and being creative in the world out there. And whether that involves directly helping other people, or whether that involves building a business, or whether that involves building a great family, different people are going to have different values in that regard. But at the end of the day, it's what is the skill? What is the value that makes all of that possible? In my view, all of that is made possible from thinking. So we're back to this question of thinking. Thinking is the most important value that you have. You have to cherish it, you have to cultivate it, you have to practice it, you have to really be good at it, because your life depends on it and your happiness depends on it. And that means you got to be honest, right? So talk about this blueprint. Now people talk about honest means don't lie, but it's much more than don't lie. Honest means be honest to yourself as a primary. It means face reality. It means be true to the fact. Don't ignore facts. Don't pretend they don't exist. Don't pretend stuff doesn't exist because it doesn't match your priors. Try not to be biased. Try to be a real, proper thinker. Have integrity. If you believe in something, if you do it. So it's, and then be productive. So many people out there leech off of other people, live off of other people in one way or another because they're lazy, because they don't want to think for themselves. And they don't push themselves. They don't make the most of their lives. They don't, strive to be the best human beings that they can be. So they live mediocre, plain, simple, boring lives. And you see that all around you. Most people around us are like that. Life is boring. It's plain. It's uninteresting. It's unexciting. And I say, you only got one life. Every minute that passes, you'll never get back. What are you waiting for? What is it going to take to get you off your butt and actually do something with your life and make the most of it? Be productive, think, treat other people with justice, the way they deserve. I don't believe in treating people equally. People don't deserve to be treated equally. Some people deserve crap and some people deserve everything.
Based off of their merit.
Based off of their merit, absolutely. Based off on the value that they present to you, right? What does deserve mean? To whom? Based on how good of a person they are. Right? And virtue should be rewarded in life, not in an afterlife, but in life. So, justice means that. It doesn't mean equality, which is what it's come to mean in the world around us. And then, I think people need to internalize the idea of pride. And I know pride is considered a vice out there, but I think that's a massive mistake. Pride, recognizing your own value, viewing yourself as important, and then taking seriously your life. Taking seriously the idea that you need to make the most of it. That to me is a massive virtue and something that people neglect all the time.
Yeah, and I think not pride in a sense where I'm putting myself above you.
No.
I'm proud of what I've accomplished.
Yeah, you're irrelevant in that sense. It's what you accomplish. It's what you do with yourself.
There's a balance, you talked about the Bible. I mean, Jesus said that the most important commandment is love God, but love your neighbor. Love others.
I don't love my neighbor. Do you love your neighbor?
Well, but what is love?
You don't even know your neighbor.
But love others, right? Other people.
But some people I love, some people I hate. I'm proud of the fact that I hate people.
But I think what the definition of love is, though, is like just being nice to people, being kind. I mean,
that's not the definition of love. Look, I mean,
love is it's defined in 1 Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind, love isn't self-serving, love doesn't keep.
Yeah, so love is a lot of different things, and it's the deepest emotion one feels. And why are we trying to whitewash what Jesus says? He meant love thy neighbor, love him. And I don't think he meant just have respect for him and leave him free and leave him independent. No, he meant love him. When he says love thy neighbor like yourself, as thyself, he meant it. I don't believe that. So I disagree with Jesus. I know that's controversial, but I think Jesus is setting you on the path for unhappiness because you should love yourself. You should respect yourself above all. And only from that context do I love other people. I don't tell my wife before I marry her, I love you because you mean nothing to me. This is selfless. No, my love for my wife is the most selfish thing I have.
You wouldn't lay your life down for your wife?
Yes, out of a selfishness, because my life would be meaningless if I didn't.
She's not going to listen to this, so go ahead.
Oh no, I'm sure she will. But but that's a selfish thing. I married my wife because how she makes me feel.
You would laying your life down for your wife would be selfish?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why would that be?
Because I couldn't live with myself without her, and I couldn't live with myself knowing that I didn't do everything I could to save her. So absolutely selfish because of how high of a value she is in my hierarchy of values. But It's not, but that's my wife. Would I lay my life down for my neighbor? No.
What about your kids?
My kids, yes. One of them, maybe not both. It depends, right? Depends on the day. No, but for my kids, I'd risk my life for my friends. I'm not going to risk my life really risk my life. I mean, really for a stranger. If my kids and the neighbor's kids are drowning in a pool, I'm saving my kids first. And I'm not embarrassed by that. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not going to apologize for that. They're my kids. I love them more than my kids' neighbor. I don't even like my kids' neighbors. I'd help them out if it didn't cost me too much. But if it cost me a fortune, if it cost me my life, I wouldn't help them out. So my life is measured by my life, by my values, by my standards. And I respect other people and will help other people. If I don't know anything bad about them, I'll help other people because I have a general respect of humanity. But I don't again, there's a hierarchy. Some people more important than other people. Some people I love more than other people. And I don't love every neighbor that I have. I certainly respect every human being out there and happy to help other people as long as they're innocent. Bad people, I don't want to help.
Yeah, makes sense. So do you have any practical tips for thinking? So for example, I've heard, studied many of the most successful people, they'll talk about putting an hour on their calendar where, once a week I sit for an hour and think. Every morning, Brian Tracy said every morning I pull out a notepad and write down 10 ideas. Do you have any practical things that you do?
Yeah, I think the first thing that people need to do is sit down and commit themselves to thinking. Because thinking is something you should do every minute of every day. I mean, you relax sometimes and you entertain sometimes, but basically, when you're fully alert.
Do you ever watch TV?
Yeah, so that's I watch quite a bit of TV. We can talk about some TV shows, but I just did a whole episode on Squid Game, so the most evil show ever. But don't let your kids watch it.
I walked into the room and my kids had just started it. And it was like the opening scene where they're like in a prison yard and the gun turrets come out and start shooting everyone.
That's the middle of the first episode.
I was like, what the heck? I'm like, no. Turn this
No,
off.
They'll watch it behind your back, but hopefully not. But it's an evil show. It really is a disgusting show. And the violence is off the charts. It stuns me that parents don't care about violence and having the kids watch violence and completely make violence, desensitized completely to violence. It's just horrific. Anyway, so commit yourself first of all to thinking. What does thinking mean, right? Because people talk about thinking, but what does it mean? It means focusing your mind. It means actually looking at the world out there, looking at the facts. I would say the tips I would say is, don't believe anything anybody tells you. I see on both sides of the political spectrum. Each have their experts, each have their gurus. Maybe these gurus on mainstream media, these gurus on YouTube or whatever. They have their gurus and then people just absorb it and then mouth it back. Don't believe anything. Test it. Challenge it. Go read multiple sources. Read the enemy. Read people you think you hate. And test yourself against them. Don't just accept whatever the status quo has always been. And this is true in business. This is true in every aspect of your life. But politics is big on people's mind these days. Take it in politics. Take an issue and read the other side. And try to have an open mind. Try to look at what are the facts, what is not fact, and then test it all out against what? Not against what, I was going to say Rush Limbaugh said, but Rush Limbaugh passed away. But not against what Tucker Carlson said, but against reality, against the facts, against what you know to be facts, right? And try to get as many of those as possible. So thinking is about facts, first of all. It's
finding truth.
Finding the truth, and the truth is out there. The truth is in reality. So what you need is evidence. What you need, if we're talking about COVID, what you need are numbers. What you need is data. And you need to also be objective about what you know and what you don't know. Right? I've seen people...
And check your own biases.
Yes, I've seen people analyze statistics who know nothing about statistics. And as a consequence, don't know what they're talking about. And they completely miss what's in the numbers. So know what you know and what you don't. I've seen doctors analyzing statistics in COVID, don't know a clue because they're great doctors, they don't know statistics. Don't assume you know everything. So if it's really important, study up and learn the skill that you want to know. If you want to know statistics, get a good stat book, study statistics. Don't just, again, get it from whoever you supposedly trust in the media. So really investigate stuff. Really, and investigate stuff means read widely. And when I do a show on a topic, I always try to read up people I know I disagree with, because I want to know what they're saying, and I want to know maybe I'm wrong on some of this.
You want to know the enemy's argument.
I want to know the enemy's argument, but it's also possible, unlikely, but possible that they're right, or at least there's something in their argument, or there's an element of truth. And it's always good to understand where they're coming from, because then you'll know how to attack it. If you don't know where they're coming from, so for example, if you take critical race theory, right, which is garbage, right, it's complete nonsense. But you've got to understand the history of race in America, the history of racism, the people's attitude towards racism, how much racism there is or isn't in America today. You've got to have a context. This CRT didn't come out of nowhere, right? It's garbage built on some elements of reality. You got to understand something about police brutality and who they kill. And if you're saying, oh, they kill everybody equal, well, you better have the data to support that. Not just because somebody said it on TV, but maybe the cops are racist. How do you know they're not? Do you know they're not? So it's important to be able to, before you talk about these things, actually know that what you're saying is true, which is hard.
Yeah. And we see so many people today, they're just reciting headlines.
Yes.
All they do is recite headlines. They don't even bother to read the article.
Yes.
They literally read the headline. They think they know what the article said. And a lot of times in today's clickbait world, they try to bait you into the headline, but then when you read, it's not actually what the headline said. Yeah. But they'll just recite the headlines, and that's
or the tweets, or we're now into a culture of one-liners.
I do these videos where I'll spend 5-6 hours to research a subject in depth, put all the charts, all the data. The video comes out 25-30 minutes long, and someone will message me and say, TLDR, can you just give me the bullet points? And it's like, dude, I literally put 6 hours of research into a 25-minute video. If you can't spend 25 minutes to know the subject,
forget, you're not thinking.
You're never going to make it.
And that's the point. Think.
I've compressed it as best as I can, but if you want the bullet points, forget it.
And thinking is, I don't want you to think about it as hard work, but thinking takes effort. Yeah. It takes focus, it takes time. So taking an hour a day, I think you should take 8 hours a day, because I think you should do it all the time. You should be thinking all the time. You shouldn't, again, even when I watch TV, I'm thinking, what's the message? What's the theme?
It ruins it, though. It ruins it.
It doesn't for me, because
nowadays everything I'm watching, I'm like, it's propaganda.
Some things are propaganda, and you shouldn't watch them. Yeah. It's a waste of time. But there are good shows out there that are not propaganda. Or you look.
I find myself just watching old Seinfeld episodes nowadays.
So art is much deeper. Good art is much deeper than politics. You can have a bad political theme, but a really, really important theme about free will, or about something deep about what it means to be a human being. So I think you can enjoy art in a number of different levels. And
you think meme culture is an extension of that today?
I think meme culture is part of the non-thinking.
Oh, not part of art.
No, it's not art. It's
shortcuts.
Yeah, it's like cartoons. Cartoons are not art. They might be entertaining and they might be informative, but they're not art. Art is much deeper than that.
All right, so those are good tips. Lots of good stuff. I encourage everyone to think as much as I can, and I think to your point, as you said, the first thing we first started talking at lunch was we have to change the way people think. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and end it and wrap it up on that. You said you were used to be with Ayn Rand Institute. You're still kind of helping. I know you guys do education.
Well, I'm chairman of the board, so I'm still heavily involved.
What should people be paying attention to? Do you want to point people to anywhere?
Well, first of all, they should all read Ayn Rand if they want, because it's stimulation to think.
Do they have to start with the Fountainhead before they go to Atlas Shrugged?
No, they can start with Atlas Shrugged. Depends on your. I started with Atlas Shrugged. I mean, it depends on your inclination. If you're more interested in kind of personal stuff, I would say Fountainhead is better. If you're interested in the world, if that's where you like to play, start with Atlas Shrugged. Read her nonfiction as well. She's got some powerful stuff in the nonfiction. Virtue of Selfishness, the Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, Philosophy, Who Needs It. There are lots of books. Ayn Rand Institute has AynRand.org. We have, thousands of videos, lectures, courses, whole educational programs on her ideas. So if you want to learn how to think and with the right kind of epistemological tools for how to think, the Ayn Rand Institute is a great place to go. Because I'll really give you the lessons. We have courses on logic, we have courses on thinking. And then if you want to follow me, yaronbrookshow.com, and of course Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, everywhere. I need to figure out what these blockchain new networks are, so I can get in on that gig. But maybe I'll wait for the first movers to get it established, and then
we'll link to all that in the show notes below. Great. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.